knowledge and motivation. It's the two things that every physical trainer are supposed to bring to the table, the training table, or the gym. It doesn't matter if it's the Guido juice bag meathead who's teaching a 75-year-old grandmother how to pick up 2.5-pound dumbbells or stretch out her ailing hip, or a trainer of athletes at the absolute elite level. They bring knowledge to the table for certain, but most importantly, motivation. Somehow, every armchair sports fan on earth thinks they're a super genius because they say things like, you know, a lot of talk about the physical side, but I think a lot of this is mental. Well, guess what? That's not a genius idea, bro. Everybody analyzes the mental side, probably even too much. Yes, sometimes there are actual physical reasons why something happens. Sometimes strategy wins out. It's not all about confidence or momentum or how bad someone wants it or how fired up they were getting into attack mode before the game. We all know how important the mental side of this is, and the physical part cannot come without the mental part, which means, yes, you need a trainer to motivate you to put in the extra work, to get up in the morning when it's cold out, get on the bicycle, push that extra mile, carry that extra intensity, or back it down one day when you're feeling all pissed off and you really want to get out there and sling some dumbbells and say, nope, today's a day to rest. That's the knowledge that a good trainer brings to the program. But if you don't want to listen to it, it really doesn't matter. So the motivation comes first. You have to be motivated to accept that knowledge. So from that perspective, Aldon Baker is the master motivator. His record is absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. If anyone else had this type of a record as a coach or a trainer in any other sport, ESPN would have already run 75 different documentaries on this person. Now look, there's a huge difference between an NFL head coach and a motocross trainer. What Bill Belichick has done in the NFL is amazing and really not comparable per se. But remember, Aldon Baker's record right now stands as 17 seasons he has trained a rider in AMA Supercross. 14 of those seasons, he's had a rider go on to win the championship. And he's looking right now at 15 out of 18 this year because Jason Anderson leads the points and Marvin Musquin is actually second. Now look, Aldon doesn't need me to give him credit. A lot of people give him credit. A lot of people actually pay him a lot of money, which is the ultimate form of credit. No debt, having money, oddly, coincidentally. So he doesn't need me to pump up his record. Although there are a few that are going to poke holes in the program and say he only wins with the best guys. And I've heard that and I understand that argument. I'm not here to say if Aldon is overrated or underrated or not. What I am trying to figure out is what makes this program work. The cool thing about this sport is that we in the media get a pretty good amount of access. I've blown the minds of some NASCAR reporters when I say, yeah, I can go to where Ryan Dungey rides on a Tuesday afternoon and watch him ride and talk to his trainer and see what they're doing. The NASCAR guys are like, what? You can watch someone at midweek? That's not super unbelievably top secret? No, not in this sport. So I've been fortunate enough to ask Aldon a lot of questions over a long period of time and a lot of races, to hang out at his various compounds with his athletes through the years during the week, and I've been able to learn a lot from it. Now, I have not learned anything on the physical side. I have no idea what the AB program is or why he makes riders do a certain amount of miles on the bike and not do too many or too little. Those formulas are something that I believe he has proprietarily stored, not in a safe, but in his head. GNCC champion Caleb Russell, who works with Baker, says that's the most amazing thing about this program. He doesn't know why Aldon tells him to do what he does, but there must be some sort of math, some sort of metric that he's figured out that no one else does. When Aldon gives you a program and says your heart rate needs to be right here for this amount of time and then right here for this amount of time, there's some sort of formula that only he knows that seems to work better than everyone else's. But that's the physical side. It's the mental side that makes all that work. And after hanging out enough, analyzing this enough, I think I've figured out one of the keys. It's probably one of the most obvious things of all. The power of Aldon Baker is the power of paranoia. In this week's Racer X Exhaust podcast, we're going to go hang out with Aldon. He gave me about 40 minutes of his time in a really cool interview while giving me a tour of the Baker's Factory down in Florida. Why did he not just call it the bakery? Why not Baker's Factory? What would a Baker's Factory pump out? Baked goods. It's a bakery, not a baker's factory. I got to hang out with Aldon. You'll hear our one-on-one conversation. You probably heard some of this in a Racer X Films video that we published last week. That was a 13-minute version of this, which will be about 35 minutes of total audio. For the video, we just gave you the actual physical stuff about what's in each shop. For this podcast, we left in all the audio, which includes a lot of his philosophies on training. But still, this was only about 36 minutes out of several hours that we got to hang out with Aldon all day. And I asked him as many questions as I possibly could. And what I figured out was Aldon's always looking over his shoulder, never taking things for granted, and always thinking that each day is the last day he's going to have this type of success. And that's what keeps him motivated, and that's what keeps his athletes going that way too. So enjoy this edition, episode number 4 of the Racer X Exhaust podcast. I'm Jason Weigandt, and this is all brought to you by Yoshimura, the leader in four-stroke performance for over 63 years. With unsurpassed quality, service, and development, Yoshimura is the brand you want for your dirt bike, ATV, or street exhaust. Check them out at yoshimura-rd.com. You know, Yoshimura puts out some really good pipes for those small 125 street bikes like Honda Groms and Kawasaki Z125s. A bunch of dads in my neighborhood just got a bunch of these Coleman camping bikes. I mean, they're lawnmower engine mini bikes. They're terrible. They ride terribly in the dirt and on the street. And now I'm thinking I need to get a Grom or a Z125 to buzz around the streets of the neighborhood and really show them what's up. And if I do, I'll put a Yoshimura exhaust so, they can hear me and think I'm like a bad dude because I got the loudest bike on the block. And one that has a little more power than them. Yeah, their bike's even slower than a 125 Grom. So check out Yoshimura-rd.com and check out our awesome theme song for this podcast about podcasts. Let's go. Podcast. 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 Podcast, 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 podcast. Yeah, and if any of you bastards figured out that you can just hit that 15-second fast-forward button twice to get through that entire theme song, I'm going to come through this phone and whoop your ass. And if any of you old guys that don't know how podcasts work don't realize you can do that, please don't go back 15 seconds to listen to my explanation of how to do it for the next show. Okay, Aldon Baker. To properly explain the power of Paranoia, I have to use his original client, Ricky Carmichael. Let me take you back to the 2005 Unadilla National. Now, there was a lot on the line in the 2005 season. James Stewart and Ricky Carmichael were destined to have a career collision course in 2005. They were just far enough apart in age that they never raced as amateurs. They never raced against each other in the 125 class. They would not face off head-to-head until they were both in the Premier Division in 2005, which is kind of fitting. That's where you would want the first showdowns to come. These were the two most hyped amateur phenoms, I believe, ever. We knew this was coming for about 10 years, and then it finally happened in the 05 season. And Carmichael got the drop on everyone. By the way, there was this Australian guy named Chad Reed who also looked like he was going to flip the script and start beating Carmichael for titles on a regular basis. But in 05, guess what? Carmichael rolled everybody in Supercross. James got hurt. Chad says his bike wasn't where he wanted it to be. Carmichael comes back on a Suzuki to win the Supercross title. And by the end of the AMA Nationals, we knew that he was going to win the Outdoor Motocross Championship as well. He had reclaimed the top spot in the sport. There was nothing to worry about. All the paranoia at the beginning of the year, Reed and Stu, RC had them covered. Yet here we were at Unadilla. Carmichael goes down in the first turn and comes from basically last to second and is making up huge chunks of ground on Stewart, who's leading. Now, Stu fans, he was on a KX250. Carmichael was on an RMZ 450 four-stroke. We now know for sure, especially at Unadilla, Stu is at a gigantic disadvantage. But the stopwatch showed that Carmichael was closing. He was probably going to catch him and win the moto. And honestly, even if he didn't, there was still Moto 2. And everyone knew that Carmichael would just win Moto 2 and take the overall. Except for one person. There's this mom standing on the side of the track. This is the old uphill that leads the riders towards Screw You. They used to call this uphill the elevator shaft, I think, back in the day at Unadilla. I'm the pit reporter that day for the live announcing crew, so I'm in the mechanics area. And I cannot take my eyes off this mom who is freaking out, like absolutely freaking out. She is shaking. She is managing to bite her nails, but also cover her eyes with her hands at the same time. She has now turned the same color as a Honda. She is like screaming, and the tears are like coming out of her eyes in accordance with the screams. You would swear that this mom had a privateer rider who was given a one-shot deal with a factory team, and if he has a good ride on this day, he will forever make a living and be rich and famous, or if he fails on this day, he'll be living in the gutter as a homeless beggar. It looked like everything was being determined on this first moto at Unadilla. But that mom was Meanie Jeannie Carmichael, Ricky's mom. She was freaking out. And I'm like, what is she so worried about? The season has been awesome. He's going to win the overall today. He's going to win the title. He's got Stu covered. He's closing 2 to 3 seconds a lap. Carmichael's take nothing for granted. And her paranoia actually was somewhat well-founded because late in the moto, Ricky catches James. He makes the pass. James tries to wick it up and come back. Makes a poor decision over a jump and ends up leaping over Ricky and landing on his back, and they both go down in a heap. Stu is knocked out. Kevin Windham from third place would actually cruise past both of them to win the moto. And by the way, shocker of all shocks, RC came back to win the second moto and win the overall. Now, a lot of people remember that day where Ricky and James came together for that crash. But what sticks out to me more was how nervous Ricky's mom was about one freaking moto win out of the probably 200 of them that he won in his career. And that paranoia trickles down. I was talking to Ricky about that just a few weeks ago at the Ricky Carmichael Daytona Amateur Supercross. And he said, dude, man, when I was a free agent, when my contract was up, I was sweating it. I was seriously worried that I wasn't going to get a ride. And I'm like, are you serious? You're Ricky Carmichael. You're seriously paranoid and worried that you weren't going to get a ride. And he's like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I was sweating it all the time. And what he said he misses the least about racing was that when he was battling, every night he would go to sleep worried that someone was going to figure out how to beat him. That level of paranoia is ultimately what led him to retire after 10 years. It was that kind of stress. And that comes with not taking anything for granted. All the previous wins meant nothing. He had to win the next race. I've kind of noticed that same thing from Aldon Baker, who, of course, was working with Carmichael back then. Now, in our industry, we know that Aldon Baker's record is astonishingly impressive. In fact, if he were doing this at this level in any other sport, ESPN would have already put together 75 different documentaries on him. Riders trained by Aldon Baker have won 12 out of the 16 Supercross championships that have existed since Aldon came into the sport. And by the way, it looks like he's going to get a 13th this year because Jason Anderson is leading the points and Marvin Musquin is now second in the series. That is an unbelievable record. And you can't compare what a motocross trainer does to all the work that an NFL coach puts in. But Bill Belichick is getting all sorts of credit for basically that same amount of time that he's been dominant. There haven't been that many titles for him. I know it's totally different. But I'm just saying, if someone wins 13 out of 17 championships, going to be a lot of talk about them. Now, some people think maybe Aldon, there's too much talk, too much credit. He just takes the best guys and wins the championships with them. Now, I don't necessarily agree. I don't think Jason Anderson was a shoo-in to be a 450 Supercross titleist. I don't think that Marvin Musquin was either. I remember at the beginning of 2011, no one was universally saying that Ryan Villopoto was better than Dungey, Reed, and Stewart. I don't think people were saying that about Dungey before the 2015 season either. But look, dudes, it's another podcast for another day to try to figure out if Aldon is as good as his record says he is. What's more important to me is to try to figure out why he is so successful. Now, what's great about this sport is we do get a lot of access in the media. I've blown the minds of NASCAR reporters by saying, yeah, I can go down to where Ryan Dungey trains and watch him ride on a Tuesday afternoon and talk to him and talk to his trainer. Those guys are like, what? That's not top secret? If a NASCAR reporter started snooping around to where the speed is made in NASCAR, which is the race shops, he's going to get kicked out. You might be able to talk to the crew chief off to the side of the shop for 5 minutes, but the hoods of the cars will be down. I'm not joking. They actually make sure that no one can see the hoods up on the cars at midweek so no one can take spy photos. So I'm pretty lucky to get a lot of access. I've talked to Aldon a lot over the years that he's been involved with the sport, which are pretty much a mirror of the time that I've been in this industry. Only time-wise, he's been much more successful than I am. So I've learned a lot, I've asked a lot, I've gotten a lot of answers, and occasionally I do get to go down to his compound called the Baker's Factory. Why is it not called the bakery? It should be the bakery. What would a baker make in his factory? A baker makes baked goods. It should be called the bakery. I've gone down to the bakery a lot, been able to talk to him, and I can't figure out the physical side. Look, I'm not claiming that I know exactly what his ab program workout is. I do know I talked to GNCC champion Caleb Russell right before I went there this time. Caleb works with Aldon, and he's like, man, he's got some sort of proprietary math formula stored in his head. Caleb doesn't know why Aldon's program says do this at this heart rate for this long, and then do this at this heart rate for that long. But for some reason, it works awesome. And it's a better ratio and mathematical formula than anyone else is able to come up with. Now, that's the physical side. But guess what? You know, a lot of people are talking about the physical side, but I think a lot of it is mental. Indeed. I think one of the reasons Aldon is so successful is because he takes nothing for granted. He has that same level of paranoia that Carmichael and his mom did back then when he was working with them. Aldon Baker truly believes, for all the success that he has had, that you're only as good as your last race. And I know this because he literally told me that. He literally said, mate, you're only as good as your last race, mate. And I said, wait, did you really just say mate twice? And then I said, dude, you're Aldon Baker. You've won 13 Supercross titles since you've come in the sport. What are you even worried about? And he says, no, man, he's worried that the bosses in Austria, the Bostrians, will call him and say, hey, man, your program's not working. Get out of there. He didn't say this, but he's probably worried that another trainer might have great success, and suddenly Aldon won't be able to carry the price premium that he does that comes with all those championships. He's worried about all this. Now, maybe you think he shouldn't be worried because, as I hear all the time, dude, Aldon is loaded. He's bringing in so much cash. He's bringing in so much money. He's loaded. Well, he might be loaded eventually, but anyone who's ever been an entrepreneur knows the early years of your business are really the investment stage. I think right now, Aldon's just looking at big loans for the property and the build-out and everything he's had to do down there at the bakery. So he's not raking it in yet. Now, maybe in 10 years, he'll amortize those costs, and then it'll all be pure profit and gravy, which he wouldn't even eat. But right now, he's sweating it, man. And I can tell you this, a lot of people think that KTM is paying that program, they're subsidizing that program. It's not actually how it works. Aldon needs 4 riders to make the bills work, and he's got 4 right now. The only deal he has with KTM is if he loses a client, a guy retires or gets hurt or quits, KTM will pay for that 4th spot. They'll fill in the cost that he would lose in that situation. So that gives you an idea of where Aldon's motivation is. All he wanted from KTM was, give me a backup plan in case I lose a client, because I'm so worried about what would happen if I did. And right now he has 4 riders with Musquin, Anderson, Tickle, and Osborne. So that means KTM is actually not paying anything. The riders are paying for it. But indeed, Aldon even gets phone calls from Austria, the bosses in Austria, if his riders struggle. And they wonder, hey, man, step it up. We want things to go well. We want to win more races. Only as good as your last race. I cannot believe that the guy could be that paranoid. And adding to it, so now he has this whole new section of the bakery that houses Troy Lee Design's 250 team and also the Rockstar Energy Husqvarna 250 team. Those guys work with Tyler Rattray. Rattray had been trained by Baker when he was racing. That was not a guarantee that KTM would go there. I thought that was one big happy family, but Troy Lee Designs actually shopped around, and they even looked at Blake Baggett's place as a potential home for their riders. So Aldon needs to keep them happy. He needed to get a second loan in order to pay for all the construction to build that second part of his facility for them. Now, when the next contract comes, I think he's got maybe a 4-year deal or something like that with TLD and the Husky 250 group. You know, if they're happy 4 years later and they have an even larger contract, maybe he brings in some more clients. Maybe by then he'll feel pretty secure. But I can tell you right now, in the early stages of the baker's factory or bakery, he's still worried. And I ask, is there any better motivation than worry? Nope. That's what ensures that Aldon Baker is going to put in a ridiculous amount of time and effort and pay attention to every single detail and give his clients the best possible work, because he is so worried that it's suddenly going to stop working and then he's going to be stuck paying all these bills for a desolate facility that no one's using. And that probably is never going to happen. But when you take nothing for granted, you ensure that you do the best job possible. I'll give you one more example of that. There were some rumors during the offseason that Anderson and Weigandt weren't getting along. They weren't riding together as much. Maybe there was some personal friction. We heard this quite a bit through the pits in Anaheim 1. Steve Matthes, of course, mentioned this in his observations column, and I got a text from Aldon. He was super pissed. Now, there are so many things that Aldon could be mad at through the years, so many accusations that he could be upset with, but that was the only time I've ever actually seen him get that mad. So I talked it out with Aldon at the race the next weekend. I think it was in Phoenix. I don't even remember what race it was. And I said to him, man, but why do you care so much? I mean, we had to talk about this for 30-some minutes, and he was so mad about what got out. And he's like, because I don't want the information getting out. I don't want the people in Austria, reading in on Racer X and thinking that we don't have a top-shelf program down here. We don't have everything under control. And again, I'm like, dude, you really think the Bostrians are going to get mad based on something they read on Racer X? Like, they'll go to you. You're the source. They would surely check with more people than me or Matthes. But the guy's just worried, man. The guy's just worried that this could all come to an end, and he wants to sweat all the details. And yeah, I was actually a little mad a few weeks later when Anderson ran into Marvin, knocked him down. And then I checked with Aldon, because that's what he wants me to do. I checked with him to say, hey, are they still good? And he said, oh yeah, everything was great all week. And then a few days later, Anderson and Marvin were asked about it, and they said, well, we didn't actually see each other all week because when we're in California, we live in different towns. And Aldon wasn't here either. So I felt like him saying that everything was good. Yeah, maybe they got along, but that's only because they didn't see each other. Maybe I wasn't getting the full truth of that. But that just shows how badly he wants to make sure that bad information does not disseminate from that facility, because he's afraid it could all come crashing down. So that's what motivates Aldon Baker to motivate his riders. The power of paranoia. A big thanks to Aldon for giving me this upcoming 35 minutes that you'll hear here as we take a tour of the new 250 side of the bakery. And thanks for him for talking to me for several more hours that day so I could use that information to now talk about him behind his back, but also record it into a podcast and basically label him as a paranoid worrywart. Yeah, that's real hero stuff. Now, here's the conversation with myself and Aldon Baker.
2 years ago, we stopped here at the Baker's factory right around the annual Daytona trip. And back then, Aldon, it was just one facility, one building, and I guess a couple of tracks over there, indoors and out style. But a huge addition. You've kind of doubled the place in those last 2 years.
Yep. Yeah, Jason. I mean, sure, it's been an undertaking, but, the goal here was also to provide some workshops and facility for the rest of the KTM Husqvarna group.
Right.
And create a bit of a feeder system for what I'm trying to develop over, on the other side. So, this was the next big part of the addition, and obviously done a little different.
Yep.
We've done the garages a little bit more compact.
Well, the other building is a giant, tall, one big room, for the most part, metal building.
Yes.
This is not even close to that.
Right. And the reason, too, over there, I originally figured I may have to bring equipment into the building.
Right.
And going forward, that was not needed. We have a separate area for equipment.
Oh.
And that's why when you look at workshops here, it's strictly for the motorcycles and the athletes.
Right.
So a little bit more compact, but then also I could make it, a lot more usable, and also have that area where there is separation between the teams so that they feel they have their privacy if they want to do different things or testing and all that. So
Gotcha.
that was the aim doing this whole area, but yet still including it in the overall Baker's factory, because we do rotate tracks so that everyone gets the best out of the whole facility.
Yeah, and we'll go in there in a second, but I do just want to show. So when this only opened up, what, you basically had this running in July?
Yeah.
This building. So at first they were in these containers over here.
Yeah. So you can imagine the summer would have been brutal working out of these things. So I got to give the guys credit for hanging in while this was getting built, and you're working out of a container. So now the container's basically used for storage. Yes. And they finally moved over to something that's a little bit more livable and likable.
Yeah, so, this has been July?
Yeah, so that was July when it was basically finished, I would say. And then, what are we now, March? So, it's been, evolving. But while you're still doing, buildings and that, we had the outdoor track done. And then only in, September did we finally get the other Supercross track done.
Oh, okay. So you've always had the two over there, the white and red tracks?
Yes. And the outdoor track, and then we obviously started with the outdoor track on this side because already in July we were in outdoors, we needed another outdoor track. And then ventured, once we'd kind of got through that, to doing another Supercross track. And then the hurricane hit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was a mess. But a good test to make sure we have drainage done right, and all the little things you learn as you deal with the elements.
Is there a limit to how many guys, have you ever had 10 riders on one of these tracks at once, or is it never right is there kind of a magic number?
Yeah, you know what, I don't like more than 4 riders on a Supercross track.
Okay.
And obviously the outdoor track you can put a lot more. I mean, they're up to at least 8 guys, 10 guys, because you actually want that to get really rough and well bedded in. But we do manage, especially on a Supercross track, and also who's on there, the difference in experience, and and that's why with 3 Supercross tracks, you can get a good balance, I feel,
Are the layouts specifically designed among those 3 to be 3 different styles or 3 different types of things that the riders are supposed to work on?
Well,
is there a flavor to each track?
All the tracks are different layouts, obviously, and actually slightly different dirt. So. Even though even this red clay, which is great and deals with water pretty well, one is a little bit, like I've said, that this one deals a little bit more with the water if we do have a lot of rain. So it's good to have that, but it still has all the ingredients of a Supercross track with rhythm sections, whoops, the usual deal. So we just change the layout and try and work on having enough left-hand turns, right-hand turns, and also to have a good flow.
Yeah, but it's not like you said this is our tight track and this is our more open track. It wasn't by design or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
And that's where Dream Tracks does my tracks, and Jason Baker's really good at, with his knowledge of knowing what and how, and also the terrain. And every year we'll remember things out of what really was cool and what the guys kind of like, because you want it challenging, but you also want the guys to enjoy what they're doing.
Okay.
So we try and incorporate where you get a good balance between a track that they love the flow and it's sort of invigorating for them, but it's also challenging.
Has it ever been tempting to build a track that's more based on almost sections, like, hey, let's build a track that has 4 of the most gnarly whoop sections ever, so we really work on whoops, or something like that?
I'd rather and we can change the whoops. It's actually that, I have a really good track guy that is full-time, and we've even bought a specific piece of machinery just to do whoops.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, which that was a newer addition to the whole program, so we can change that accordingly and make, but one thing you want it where the guys, obviously they challenge, but not, remember how many laps we do during the week here, and you got to go and still race. You don't want to make it where they white knuckle it and we're only just waiting for someone to eat it. Because that ain't going to help the confidence. And to me, whoops, you've got to have some confidence. To me, you got to be built up.
Okay.
And then it needs to be changed, pretty often, because every weekend we go, it's a new set of whoops, a different, how they break down. So what we learn on the weekends, we try and incorporate into the weekly training to better the program.
So I was wondering, okay, so the tracks do get a little bit of tuning based on, I feel like I was struggling with X or I was struggling with YZ. You do some
Yes, like even
here.
if you talk about whoops, some of them don't really have much of an entry, maybe more of a steeper whoop coming in.
Okay.
And if we find that, that's an area we're struggling, we can change that.
I see.
And then I found lately where the whoops going in have been pretty good, but then they've got like a bigger one in the middle somewhere. And we'll adjust accordingly. So the key for me, even going on the weekends, and obviously to support my guys in that, but also to get feedback, see where there's issues that they felt that were unique or that could be done, worked on a lot more. And then we'll come here and then I'll give the feedback to my track guy, and then he'll make it happen. So
well, I'm interested that you brought that up, because what I hear all the time is, well, Aldon is the trainer, so he's in charge of them being fit. But for sure it's bleeding into, and it always has, into the actual riding technique and the ability and the speed and all that. Your job is not just to make sure they do 20 minutes without getting tired.
Right.
So but it's not like you race professionally out here.
No, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
So when I started, that was my job, was just fitness, nutrition, and strength.
Yes.
Get them ready, and then the rest is up to them.
Yep.
But it's like anything. I mean, I've been doing it 18 years. You learn and you analyze, and obviously we have enough equipment like the Lit Pro stuff that that we can utilize to find out where are our guys having issues, what are we doing, and it has involved, because that is the biggest part of the training, is actually the riding. Everything else, the cardio, the strength, and everything else is really to help the riding. So
yes, it is a race. It is not a fitness contest.
Exactly.
It is a riding skills competition.
Exactly.
Yes.
So most of the focus, and that's the whole purpose of the facility, is to be able to get everything as close as possible, that we can go to the races and it's not such a big jump or it's something that's totally new to them. In fact, we try and get it where they go to the races and it's easier. So it starts here, and it starts where, yes, I've watched enough and been blessed enough to be around good riders that I see enough and can put in pointers and then design their ride program around their strengths and weaknesses.
And also, I would think the fitness side, I always say it's not like a gas tank where you just built up stamina. Their mileage, if they ride badly, if they ride tight, if they're struggling in a section, if they make mistakes, that's going to have a much more drastic effect on them getting tired than their actual level of fitness.
Exactly. And that's why it is race. I mean, I felt like we've just come out of Daytona, and for all my guys, probably one of the harder days that they've ever dealt with. So probably not the easiest, where we've gone to Daytonas in the past and it's been a breeze, so you're exactly right. Depending on how things go, or if they crash and they have to work harder. I mean, what Jason had to do in his heat race to make 9th was definitely not easy. But there again, those are what we prepare for. You hope you never have that, but you do prepare for that.
Yeah, you just can't totally separate the fitness side from what actually happened on the track. They're welded together.
Yeah.
You want to show us a little more of the insides of these buildings here? So this is the dream scenario for any rider to be having. This is Baker's factory.
Hope so.
Yeah, this is what the process they've refined. Oh,
and look
Tyler
who
Rattray hanging out here. What's up? But you're not mic'd up, so don't even bother.
So we have Tyler here, who obviously is overseeing the riders on this side, making sure they're fueled up like he's fueling up.
Interesting.
But so we've got an area here where each rider has their own cabinet to keep their gear. And get ready as they need to do before they can obviously go out and ride. So
this is the main spot where the riders are hanging out.
Yeah, so this is the hangout place for them. And then Tyler's got his little office here where he can also analyze and also show video.
Show video. So who will be shooting that, or do you have a way of? How does that get shot?
Typically, either Tyler will do some filming, or if one of the mechanics is not actually giving the lap times, he can do some filming. So, and it depends. Girlfriend, buddy,
Girlfriend, buddy.
Video is video, and we do have enough people
come out
around.
More. I didn't know we could give back to this program.
Yeah.
We got a camera right now.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
As long as you're prepared to pull it up there between, hang out and watch the abuse from what they see out there.
Yes, yes. Well, Tyler wanted us to fix the printer earlier, so it's all the same.
It's always something. I mean, it's an evolving, thing. So.
And that proves the point again. You're not just doing fitness stuff here. You're watching the guys ride on video and trying to figure out how they can ride better.
And then obviously all the polar stuff is downloaded, and that's checked and gone over, and making sure that everything balances out each day. So it's quite like you said, it's become a science.
Yes.
Where it's just not, you don't want to leave too much out there for just, fair play. You want to try and analyze and make sure you're covering your bases, because it's not I feel like the weeks go quickly and there's not a lot of days you have before you're back out there racing. If you can be learning as much as possible and everyone putting their best foot forward, it's, it seems like the better way it's going to go through the season.
Do you look back at 2002 or 2005 and do you almost think like, wow, I cannot believe how much more we know then, or how much more refined the process has gotten?
Yeah, no, it's evolved, gosh, a lot.
Yeah.
And not only now, I mean, just alone with when you look at the tracks and facility, I mean, when I used to train Tyler, I mean, they didn't have this kind of facility and this many tracks and
Did you have video and lit pros?
We did have video, but not the lit pro. So we had heart rate and video.
Okay.
But even then, if you were watching, I can't watch 4 guys at once. So you would see bits and pieces from each guy, and then you would compare laps, and then you'd find out, okay, well, who's the one that's struggling the most? Then that's typically the person that you'd be trying to help and watch. Where now all the guys get support. They all get to see what the lit pro's finding, whatever, and I can go back and look at, okay, what turns was each one guy struggling with?
Right.
And then, so the next day when you come out, you're like, hey, buddy, this is where you were having problems. This is where you should be focusing a little bit more and readjust accordingly. So it's definitely elevated a lot since those days, which is good. I mean, I feel the sport's going that way, and you look at what the teams put in, I think it's important.
What about your knowledge? Just actual exercise things or diet things. Have you... I'm sure you're learning stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So has it changed?
I think the biggest thing that's changed is as the sport has evolved and as the guys, the different, I'd say, mentalities have evolved. It's like a whole new group now.
Yeah.
You get to learn, what is each guy's sort of little crux area. Is it diet, or is it just the way he approaches riding, the load of riding in? And according, you've had to adjust to it.
Yeah.
And now I feel too, with the tracks being as good as we have them, I feel like we get a lot more quality instead of having so much quantity to try and balance that problem out.
You can actually have them ride a little less.
Yeah.
Because you're more efficient.
Because it's more efficient, and we can get a little bit more closer on the training to what they race.
Okay.
Where typically, and that's always going to be an issue, is the tracks that they race every weekend. Well, that's a brand new track, just been prepped. Typically got good moisture. They've just made this track.
Just prepped it.
It's at its best of its best. Yeah, we've got tracks that have got to last months.
Yeah.
But how we do that and how we keep moisture in and create good riding for them is key. And you can see it translate into the training.
But there's not a totally different, like you read in Men's Fitness one day about this new way to work out your abs, and you're like, wow, we're going to start doing that today.
Nah.
Or some new ingredient in some food that you're like, man, I wish I had known this 5 years ago. That part's been a little more stable.
Yeah,
I see.
I feel like that area, it's the same with obviously educating the athlete.
Yeah. But you are pretty much doing similar things.
Yeah, and even with exercises, yes, we deal with young guys. We want to make it different. We want to make it exciting, but still get the job done. So you rotate and you change out exercises and make it more interesting, and also, once again, read where the guy's at and where his mentality, what makes him kind of tick, or to try and create that longevity in a sport that on one side is not creating longevity at all.
Your name gets brought up a lot.
I know.
For burning dudes out, and these guys are retiring, but you are trying to take steps, and you have all along.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, the goal is to obviously get them to win and win championships, but the downside of winning championships, they meet their goals.
Yeah.
They meet their financial, what they feel is relatively for reward for risk.
Yes.
Is good. Mm-hmm. And then, well, what is motivating them anymore, and what is driving them to put it on the edge? So you then deal with that side of it. So it is a vicious circle in a way. Because if they never had that, well, they'd be still fighting for it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Part of the sport, but yeah, one of those things.
Yeah, it's not all just I'm tired of doing exercise. Sometimes they're just like, I've done what I needed to accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's unique to a lot of other athletic endeavors where if it goes wrong here, it goes wrong in a really, really, really bad way.
And that's the thing is, so, and that's where people say, oh, okay, creating the longevity and that. Well, what sport? I mean, if you just compare even to NASCAR, I mean, it's a motor sport and it's hazardous.
Yeah.
But typically the guys can go on and on and on until they just decide they are sick of traveling. Or once again, have I got enough financially for me to find the enjoyment in what I'm doing? Mm-hmm. This sport is different and unique because if you're not prepared to put it on that edge, you're probably not going to win.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we see the downside of that, where, well, if you go over that edge, it's not pretty also.
Yeah. So, this garage here, so
this is Troy Lee's garage, as you can see, and I mean, it's each garage has its own shower, bathroom, toilet. But it is, obviously on the other side, it's definitely a lot more open and bigger. Yeah. I had to make use of the size and make it count.
But you found it better to have smaller individual things instead of
yes, because you don't really have any space wasted, and the economy of running the thing with electric and air conditioning and all of that is a lot better. Brick
building is a lot better than a metal building?
Building starts cheap, but fitting it out gets insane.
I see. And climate controlling a metal building
is not easy. So I think if you want to be quick and easy, and also you don't want air conditioning and all the other luxuries of it and plumbing and everything else, then it's not bad. But this was
a real building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, I like the way Aldon did it last year when everything got built, when they didn't even have air conditioning. That's the way I would have kept it, personally. Just keep those bills down. Speaking of bills, want to send out one more shout-out to our sponsor, Yoshimura. 63 years of experience building high-performance four-stroke exhaust systems, quality, durability. They look cool. Go to yoshimura-rd.com. They're visionaries helping us out with this podcast. I actually have a Yoshimura pipe as my microphone. I don't know if you knew that. Just use your imagination. All right, back to Aldon, thanks to Yoshimura.
So is each thing we're moving into basically the same exact
Basically
setup?
The same setup, yes.
Yep. So this is our third room.
Yeah, so this is Husky. And we're still evolving. We want to do nice flooring eventually and really make it professional, but it's coming
because
on.
you do. They have options. They didn't have to. I think people get confused. They didn't have to work out of this. They had to basically choose if they liked it or not, and if it worked for them. They weren't. No one was forced. Either of these teams. You have to work at Aldon's place.
Yeah. No, it was an option that was given. That hey, this is what makes sense if you. I mean, I feel like everyone in the industry and the teams believe that you probably need an East Coast base. We race more on the East Coast than on the West.
Okay, yeah.
And if you analyze that, the second thing is travel on the East Coast to all these East Coast races is a lot easier.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is there's no way I could have afforded to do this anywhere else. And your only option would be weather-wise, California.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening.
It's just that much more expensive.
Yes.
That's why this type of thing, all these training facilities, that's why we've never really seen that model out there.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I just don't feel, and and also with the weather conditions there, they hardly get rain. So imagine, in one way that's good. Another way is how do you create getting all this, keeping up with moisture, what we need for the soil type and everything else. So there's a lot of areas that make sense for us out here. And I believe here, obviously, travel out of Orlando is easy. It covers a lot of our bases. So it makes the most sense to me. But a lot of people were like, I'm almost like I'm selling land out here. trying to promote it, and that's not. I just feel for what we have to do, and our training. Remember too, we do need warmer climate to train for some of the East Coast motocross races, and this covers our bases.
But also, again, so even if you sell them on, we need an East Coast base, but they had to decide, these two teams, that they wanted it to be your East Coast base.
Exactly.
Yes. So you couldn't just throw them up in some dilapidated shack and say, you have to come here whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to when I look at what they have in California, the factories are based there and for a valid reason, and it's good. But they set the tone. I mean, they do it right. It's I'm sure there's a lot of money invested in what they got going over there. Well, how do you even compare to that?
Right.
So I'm trying to do with my small budget, trying to, at least compare where we are. Hey, we are committed, we're all in, and we're going to do the best job possible to try and align ourselves with what you guys have going on. And for me, Husqvarna and KTM, what they have in Europe is also like another level. So I'm always like, man, we've got to try and make that great. How we do it is not easy, and it's been a challenge, but I feel like with what I have and the ingredients that I have, we're coming along, and we're definitely learning as we're going, and we pushing forward.
But it's something I asked you earlier. You've had to go from the trainer, coach, whatever you want to classify yourself. Now you're operating a business, which you didn't have to do when you were just showing up at RV's place. That it was his operation.
Yeah.
So how are you able to not take away from, not let the, sorry guys, I got to go through receipts. Sorry guys, I got to go through reports. I got to get the bills paid. I can't watch you ride today.
It is another challenge, but I still feel my priority is not changed, and that's the riders I have, because it all starts with them, and it all starts with results. If you don't have that, then all of this doesn't matter. So that is for sure ingrained, set in stone on my priority. But having longevity, I need a facility. I need to start training other trainers. I need to start.
In the plans.
Yes, well, like with Tyler, yes, he puts his own spin on things, but I oversee everything. Charlie Mullins on the off-road stuff. He is underneath me. I still oversee what he's doing and that to try and help. And like I said, they need to learn and evolve themselves, but I'm there to try and help and guide them. And I think the biggest thing also for them, and I wish that I'd had when I started off, is the facility, where I was always linked to a rider's facility. So you still were governed by how things were with them and their property.
And how committed they were, because everything costs money. Everything
costs money. So when you talk about maintaining a track, it would be the rider deciding, do I want to spend that diesel money or this or that, or can it go another week? Typically they'd be like, you know what, I can run another week on that. And then I've got to step back and say, no, that to me does, and yes, and also be the gauge of that. But that's where I feel the experience that I have had over the last 18 years and where I think we should, that you try and navigate that route a bit better.
Right.
You hope and pray.
Because they can kind of convince themselves. I would. I'm super cheap, so that'd be my first move. I can. Well,
that's the thing. When you start looking at equipment and the cost in running diesel and operators and that, it's a whole different ballgame that people don't understand. But if you cut it short in that area, it could be a disaster.
Well, especially when it comes to track prep, but even the overall efficiency of riding, and not just the track's so bad that you crash, but just you're not getting good riding sessions.
Exactly, and that's the thing and we can see that with the effort on heart rates that align with what they race. So we kind of can already see if, the track conditions are not aligning with what we go and race at.
No kidding.
Yeah.
You can link that up.
Yeah, and that's the thing where I say is quality is now a lot more than quantity. Because of those scenarios. And that is the goal, because I don't want to put them any more risk out there than they actually need to be. So.
The bringing it from the Wednesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon to the racetrack. That's what you hear more than anything else in this industry. He rode so good during the week. If we can figure out a way to make that happen on Saturday.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is the key. Yeah. And then this is a spare garage for now.
Okay.
But it's just being used as a little bit of a gym and kind of a cardio area as warm up, for the riders. But this will become another garage, but that'll be used between these 3 teams.
What's interesting is there is not a gym on site here. So all the gym work,
No,
do they
there
do
is.
it over there?
Yes.
Oh, on that side of the big building?
Yes.
Oh, so their gym work is done on property?
Yes.
Oh, okay, it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, this group over here, because now we have a lot bigger group.
Yeah, it's a lot of guys.
We can't fit everyone in the same gym.
Okay, yeah.
So, once again, my group over there obviously have priority over the gym that I have over there.
Right.
I try and fit in where I can with what goes on here.
Yeah.
But this is all new.
Mm-hmm.
This was also started as really basically let's cover for workshop and have the riding conditions, because yes, it is, to go and join your local gym down the road is pretty cheap, and that's pretty much what they will use until we actually have it dialed where it is all for everyone on site.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything for your original main 4 guys they have everything they need over there, or do they have to go to an actual gym?
No, we
times?
have everything over there. Yeah.
Right.
So
that's challenging, I would think.
Yeah.
To get all that right.
yes.
Yeah.
So, but this is just more of a, they can do the basics here.
Mm-hmm.
So some days if there is a rain delay or it can't really work out, it's not like they can stand around. They can, be utilizing the cardio and obviously the gym stuff.
Get some mirrors, man. It's the only place where you're pumping iron don't even have any mirrors.
They'll get distracted in the mirror. You know what I mean?
All
So
right,
that's
no
why
mirrors.
you'll notice no mirrors, man.
Okay.
We don't want to have distractions. One more, and this is actually the off-road team's garage. So KTM off-road. Although I see we've got one alien that snuck inside here for a little tune-up.
Okay, that's a part.
But typically, obviously, when the KTM off-road team are here, this is their designated garage and all for them. Yeah.
Their schedule is a lot different.
It is.
Yeah.
So they typically here for a couple weeks beginning, like they were here 2 weeks ago, I think, and then they'll come 6 weeks in the summer.
Yep. But it isn't, you're not using the wood. You don't have like a GNCC track.
No. The goal for them is to actually work on speed and consistency on the actual outdoor tracks. And it's good for them because now we do have 2 outdoor tracks, so they can go between and work on building up that consistency and speed that I feel helps them, like I did with Caleb Russell was here, and he felt it was a big helping hand for him when he went back to his riding.
Oh yeah, he told me. He was even giving me literally heart rates that how much things dropped after a summer here.
Yes.
And how much a difference that made.
Yeah.
It's a controlled environment, a motocross track, compared to some random trail that's not maintained and all those things.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this will be filled up at times. All right, so how many garages was that? Is that 5?
5.
5 garages.
Yep.
And where did you come up with 5? Like, was that an actual plan? Like 6 is, we would like to have 6, we just don't have room for 6, or 5 is exactly what we need, or?
It actually started off with 4.
Okay.
Because I figured that, I knew Troy Lee was going to need something. Mm-hmm. I knew that, and actually Bobby Hewitt with the Husky was he was all about in the beginning, and it was kind of cool because he was like, man, we got to get something set up, and his reasoning was all his guys were already out in Florida.
Okay.
So for him it was a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. And he said, hey, well, Aldon, what are you doing? Get on it. So that I'm like, but I needed all the teams to be kind of all in on it for me to try and do the loan and do everything and get this thing rolling. I can't try and take out a loan and try and get this all going, and I've got 4 riders in on it. You
needed specifics.
I needed.
This is really going to happen.
Exactly. And that's where at least between Husky and KTM, they were all very open to the idea, and they'd seen what had gone on basically the start of everything at the other building. And I said, listen, I want to try and duplicate and create more of what I have there for more people, and also give them their own separation. And develop it from there. So once we had that between the off-road, obviously Husky, and then the Troy Lee. And the extra garage was also for possibility a Loretta's pre-deal, for Orange Brigade.
Some younger amateur guys.
Yeah, because I feel like, before Loretta's, there's a demand for some riders wanting to prep in the heat wanting to.
Yeah.
Well, can I provide for that? Well, that made sense. And then the extra garage in the beginning was originally just for storage. So I was like, well, you still got tires, you got parts, you got everything. Well, that changed because the garage is obviously not big enough for all the riders to be in with mechanics and bikes. So then we separated that to create, okay, you have a changing room, you have your own area where you can debrief. The trainer can go over everything with you and then leave the mechanics separate to deal with the bikes and not be disturbed.
Totally different than the original building where everybody's just in one giant box.
Yeah.
So that's the evolution of it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and hopefully as things progress and everything goes well, we can keep, I do feel I wouldn't mind one really good gymnasium done proper on its own.
Okay.
But remember the priorities is the tracks, the riding,
Yes.
the workshops.
Yep.
So maybe down the line we can hopefully get around to that when some of this debt is covered.
Because it is ultimately a motorcycle skills competition,
Yes.
not a fitness challenge.
Not a fitness challenge.
Yes,
Does that all help?
CrossFit.
But relative, it's a smaller piece of everything.
Right. And do you ever, it's such a controlled environment, have you riders ever just like, hey, here's some sand, just go have fun and play out there? Or is every riding they always do is in a controlled environment?
Yeah.
Really?
To me, part of the discipline
Yeah.
is literally the discipline of having a plan, sticking to it.
I see.
And not some random act of what I call stupidity.
Okay. Okay.
To me, that at this level and all that, if you want to go and have fun in that, it must be off somewhere and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not, to me, this is a work environment, this is a workplace, there needs to be structure, there needs to be a standard set that ties in with what I feel that the Husqvarna and KTM group have.
But there's no functional advantage to saying, hey, maybe if you rode over a bunch of logs today, that would help your balance, which is going to help you on a Supercross track. Ride what you're supposed to ride.
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, and remember too, I've had a few riders in the past where I've said, okay, they said, we enjoyed having some fun riding. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Do the workout first. Do everything that I ask of you for your job and for your skills and then go and have fun.
Oh, you'll allow it. It just doesn't replace.
Yes, it just will not replace. But I've had none of them go off afterwards and go and ride fun. None of them. And especially in the summer, good luck.
No. Okay.
You're not going to do that. When you are done, I promise you have had enough. So.
You say that they can, but you can work them hard enough to actually make sure that they can't.
There's a method in the madness.
Okay.
But there again, I mean, to me, if a guy has still got energy and he still can go out there and have fun, yes. I mean, we have where the guys have to do photo shoots and stuff like that, and to me, that's fun.
Yeah.
Because they're doing whips and carrying on.
Yeah.
But to actually stay afterwards and keep suited up and then go and have fun, nah. To me, then that the program's way too easy. Then.
That's right. It's a little bit different program. This is for the 1%. It works for them. Not about having fun on the dirt bikes anymore.
Maybe I'm missing something, but I think that's what has to work.
It's working so far. 18 years in. Thanks for the tour.
Thanks. You.
See ya.
Yes, thanks to Aldon for the tour, and I can tell you from having been there a few times now, the bakery or baker's factory is absolutely first rate. But the real story isn't just how the finished product looks, it's the methods that got him there, the thought that went into everything. Just like Caleb Russell told me, where he doesn't know why Aldon tells him to do what to do, but there's something that he knows that makes that exact program work. How many times do you hear riders say how difficult it is to transfer what they do during the week to actually ride that way on Saturday night at the races? Somehow Aldon's figured out a formula there with the baker's factory to really replicate racing-type conditions better than some other programs. I think that's the real advantage he might have right now. But other people know this, and they're trying to do the same thing, and that's probably what keeps him motivated, that paranoia that this good race, this good season could be the last. Living life at the top has some built-in insecurities. But I don't take the access that we get for granted. Like I said, in other sports, it would be insane to request what we had. There were several hours of hanging out with Aldon at his place, so I don't take that for granted. I appreciate it. Thank you, Aldon. Thank you, Yoshimura, for backing this. And check out RacerXOnline.com for everything you need, news and reviews from the world of motocross and supercross, and our new issue of RacerX Illustrated. We just wrapped it up. A really cool story about Jeffrey Hurlings and Antonio Caroli and their brewing battle this season for world championships. I did a story on the amateur racing supercross scene, which is really catching fire right now, as well as the flat track scene, also catching fire. And some other great in-depth stories and analysis about all the activities that go on in Florida behind the scenes and in front of the scenes at this time of year. And that's all exclusive content in RacerX Illustrated. Go to racerxonline.com/subscribe and sign up now. That's it for this edition of the RacerX Exhaust podcast presented by Yoshimura. We'll see you next week.